Hi, welcome to Seforim Chatter, or Nachi Weinstein's library. This is my library, especially where I have my history books, my academic books, my research works that I use for the podcast or for anything else I'm working on. There is a separate study where I have my classical Seforim. Perhaps we'll go there at a different time and show you that at a different time, but this is more the podcast-specific related items, and this is my library. So I'll show you around a little bit. You can see a little bit of what I have and check that out. So over here, and everything still needs to be arranged better, but over here is my Hebrew academic, or Hebrew history really is the better way of putting it, because it's even non-academic books. It's grouped by starting at the period of Chazal, Megillas Tainis, everything Josephus related, Philo, Pliny for those, Pliny, cut that. Philo, who are known as Yedidia, as he's talked by Zari Rossi and Mari Naim. So here's the edition by Mossad Bialik. Then there are more Seforim over here. We get into the Gainim, Megaras of Shrir Gain, Professor Brody's terrific book, Tzion, Bein Paris Lechidekel, Elam Shel Gainim Bavel, which has been translated to English as well. So, and then we go to Rishonim, really everything related to Ashkenaz, Rashi, everything related to that, the classical works, for those that are familiar, Professor Tashman, Professor Orbach, and Professor Grossman, all the classical works on Rashi, Balei Tosfos. Then I have things on Spain, and continuing on, then there's the things on the time of the Gerush Sfarad, books on Rebbe Karo, a bunch of books on Rebbe Rama, the Akeda, and many others. Here I have my books on Italy, which is something of a personal interest, Italian Jewry, so I have many books on Italy. Then I have books on Jews in the Muslim world, Sefardim. Then over here are books, mainly a lot of books of the late Meir Ben Yo, and as well as books on Greek Jewry and other various aspects. There's also some things on Ashkenaz on this shelf, book on Marshal, the Ramah, and others. Then over here is my Hebrew Sabbatian works and Shabsei Tzvi, and so you have the classic Mashiach HaSheker, you have books from Professor Gershom Sholem, Isaiah Tishby, and others, many other. There's various other books, and that Seforim Channel listeners know from the series on Shabsei Tzvi, and if you didn't listen to it, listen to it. And then on the bottom over here, I have further works on, some works on Germany, some Sefer, there's some works in the Vilna Gaon, a lot of different things, some Haskalah, Reform. This shelf is all Hasidus. These are all books on the history of Hasidus. There's a number of editions of Shivcha Besht over here, and then this is actually anti-Hasidic. This is Yosef Pearl's famous fake novel making fun of Hasidim. This is a critical edition, and this is all Hasidic history over here. This is some more modern, kind of more modern, but not exactly modern books on Rosh Hashanah Gansfried, the book on the Aruch HaShulchan, a memoir of Meir Bar Ilan and his son, Meir Berlin, the V'lashon Nad Yerushalayim, and a number of other books. This shelf over here is mainly book history. Some people, like myself, find that fascinating. Some people probably find it very boring and very tedious. But this is a Kabbalah Sa'ari by Yosef Avivi, the classical work about the Sfarim Ari. This is Rachel, the 3-volume work from the librarian of Chabad, Chaim Lieberman, Professor Yaakov Shmuel Spiegel, and other books on print history. This is just some random assorted stuff that ended up over here. So this bookcase here is kind of primary sources. I tried to put the primary sources in a separate location. Things can always change, but that's how it is for now. So here you have the classic Tzitzis Neivel Tzvi. Rabbi Yaakov just put this book against Shabsei Tzvi. I know I said the Shabsei Tzvi stuff is there, but I think like the primary sources ended up here. So things, as long as I know where it is, right? As long as the librarian or the own person whose items that are know where it is, then it's fine. So we'll say it like that. This is terrific from Simcha Asaf, Mekaris Tolos HaChinuch B'Yisrael. Everything related to Chinuch, from Seforim, manuscripts, etc. It's in here. He collected it. And then these are your kind of classical chronicles or Jewish history primary texts. So you'll have the Shem HaGedolim of the Chidah, his bibliographic work on Seforim and Gedolim. You'll have the Seder HaDoros, this is part of the new edition, Tzemach David, of Reb David Gans, the student of the Maral. His chronicle, Divrei Yosef, Yosef Sambari, he lives in Egypt, this is his chronicle, 2 editions. Korei Dorot, of David Conforti, Sefer HaYuchsin, you have Sefer Emek HaBacha and Sefer Divrei Hayamim, which are 2 history works, really fascinating, from Yosef HaKohen. Emek HaBacha is about like the tragedies that befell Klal Yisrael. By the way, the same thing for Shevet Yehuda, Shlomo Ibn Verga, and this was just redone. Mossad Bialik, they reissued it again, but Divrei Hayamim is an interesting book. It's Yosef Divrei Yamin L'Malchet Tzarfat L'Malchet Beit Ottoman. So he's telling you about the French and the Ottoman Empire. This is his history. A lot of Jewish history in there as well. There's a new edition, Professor Bonfil. And then Seder Leo Zuta of Zeo Kapsali. You can talk more about him at a different time. He really needs a podcast. I was on his farm channel. That's his history. And then there's more. This is the funnest shelf, I'd say, for me, the funnest bookcase. And this is really the funnest shelf of the bookcase. This is, you have the Chida's classic Magal Tov, his diary, as he travels around. And I would show some things. This is the one I highly recommend. I did a whole podcast on this with Ramesh Maimon, where the new edition really brings down the pictures of where the Chida traveled. And on the side, you can see where it says he went to Italy. And they'll show, for example, when he's in Germany, and on the side it shows there's like a tab showing where he was. And there's notes showing the manuscripts that he mentions, the cities that he visited, what it would look like on the time. And there's notes explaining things. And also on the side, the Chida wrote in Melitza, like a flowery prose based on Tanakh, Psukim in Tanakh, based on other, Chazal. And so they tried to explain what was going on. So this is a really fascinating kind of memoir, if you will, travelogue of the Chida, something up close and personal of a gadol that we get to see. There's some fascinating stories in here for those that don't know. Some that jump out is when he's in Amsterdam and he's going to shul and he slips on the snow and he falls down and hits his head and he ends up in shul and he can't see and he davens and he ends up being able to see. Seems like he had a concussion. There's another story that jumps to mind. He's in England and he needs to use the restroom and he goes away from the crowd and he ends up falling in and he's screaming for help and they pull him out. There's many other fascinating stories where he's mistreated. He would go from town to town. One of in Fursi, I believe, and I believe it's in that one in Germany. He was mistreated terribly, and he went there, and he was. It was Erev Rosh Chodesh Yom Kippur Katan, and they would not daven. He was like shocked. How could they not do Yom Kippur Katan? And then they sent him on the wagon. The way it would work is he was a shadar, which is he was a shliach sent from Eretz Yisrael. And the accepted practice, not only would he collect money, the accepted practice was that you would pay for the shliach to go to the next city. But of course, they didn't want to do that, so they shipped him out in a garbage wagon. They said, here, this is going anyways. And I said, go on the garbage wagon. And they really mistreated him for someone of the Chida stature. He was young at the time. He went on 2 trips to Europe. So this new edition is only on 1 trip. There's actually 2 other editions. There's 2 different ones that came out. They're the complete thing. So there's that. I have other primary texts here as well. I did a podcast on this, a really wonderful book, new edition by Machon Aleizayas, which is Igra Seforim. This is the letters of the Igra Seforim family. You can get real letters. There's a 2.5-hour podcast episode of Shimon Shimon. It's on Seforim Chatter. You can listen to that. So there's that. I have a couple of travelogues here. There were people in Europe would go traveling. We have such illustrious figures as the Bartanura, Rav Bartanura. The famous one is Binyamin Tudela, who is in the about 13th century. In Spain, and he goes traveling, so there's that. I also have here the autobiography of the Tesis Yomtiv, Yom Tov Liban Heller, Megillas Eva. He gets thrown in jail, and this really fascinating story. Brand new book, an autobiography of Aaron Isaac. He is the first Jew, I believe, in Sweden. I believe in Stockholm, in Sweden, and he talks about the community and what happened there. It's a really fascinating tale. Again, these are primary sources, so they're fun. You get to see really what Jewish life was like at the time. Igros Ramchal, this is a new edition of the letters of the Ramchal controversy that erupts around him. These are the letters defending him and attacking him and things like that. And as I mentioned before, the letters of the Bartanura, who travels to Israel and writes back letters. There's a couple of famous things in here. He talks about Sfardea being crocodiles, and he's not frogs. He talks about not Meron, it's been misquoted as Meron, but he talks about going to Kfarim and he says they would dance with torches, and he said there's no proof whatsoever that it does anything going there. It's just, it's in here. You can check it out. And many other primary sources. So that's what I have over here. Here I have various encyclopedic type works, quoting different Rabbanim and Seforim kind of entries, a couple of works of Rishon and Nunu and some other works. This is actually a really interesting work, Al Ram. It's a list of the manuscripts that are in Rabbi Avram Mordechai Alter, the Ger Rebbe. This is, I think, the Ramas, if I remember correctly on the video. And it was before the war, and so this is Kilat Yisrael Institute, which is the sister organization. It's like a museum of Avat Shalom, Rabbi Yaakov Hillel, and they put out this beautiful edition of essentially the catalog, and they went through in them. So that's what this is. Then over here I have something called Pinkasim, which I did a podcast with Professor Lisheva Kabach, and like Pinkasim they really vary. There's some other stuff on the shelf as well, but this is really Pinkasim here. Pinkasim really are ledgers, diaries. They're essentially minute books, a lot of them. So when a community would get together, they would take them, and you still have records and meetings in America, but they would have minute books, and they would take down what happened. So some of them are super tedious and boring. This is what happened, this is what we said we were going to do. And this has to do with the communities in Europe being self-governed, so to speak, organized under the non-Jewish government. So that's what a lot of these books are. Some of them are really interesting, some of them are not, but they're primary sources, so you can really pull out some interesting things from there. Some other history here. This is my bookcase of journals here. Some Asufot. This is edited by Meir Ben-Yo. This is something he did for his father, Vizchut Nisim, the Rishon LeZion. There's some fascinating articles in here on Jewish history, Seforim, other things. Minhag Nazim. This is the journal of Avat Shalom. Many Sephardi things, a lot of manuscript. Mechilta, this is a new one. Yerusha Seinu, this is a German one dedicated to German history. Many interested by Mechon Mauritius Ashkenaz, Rabbi Shlomo Hamburger, many interesting things. And these are, again, many others, many different type of things. And over here, we could flip down there to the English, because the English starts the other way, so I would flip the other way. That's really the Hebrew. And I skipped over, you probably saw some other things, but that's what's going on by the Hebrew. Then on this side of the wall, we have English history, English Jewish history, essentially. And so, same thing as before. We start with the early sources, so Josephus and early things, times of Chazal. We have a book on Masada, which I did a podcast episode on. There's a book on Philo, again, Sefer Yosipon in a translation. And then it goes again to the Rishonim. So you'll have early books, the excellent books of Professor Frank Kannervogel over here, Chaim Soloveitchik, Dr. Grach, collected essays. I don't know where his other books are. They're somewhere here. And then a book on the Jews of England, England's Jews, a book on blood libel, book on crime. And a lot of these I did podcast episodes on. So I will say as well for listeners that I do get a lot of review copies at this time, in full disclosure, that from the presses. And so a lot of these end up with the books. I do read them, prepare for the podcast. Some I skim. I don't read all of them. I often get that question also. Like, how do you read all these books? When do you find the time? Well, I have a job and I have other things and a family, Baruch Hashem, so I don't read all of them. I try to read a bunch and to skim some to prepare. So that's what you see here. Books on the Crusade. This is actually a book about the Crusade. This is a chronicle. These are translated to English chronicles on the Crusade. And then here really continues with Seforim on the Rambam, the Ramban, Spain, and then we really get into Spain. For this series on Spanish Jewry, I really bought too many books, but this is really what you have. You have the Origins of the Inquisition, big massive book by, as listeners, as viewers can see, B. Netanyahu. Who's that? That's Bibi Netanyahu's father, Ben Sion Netanyahu, the classic historian of Spanish Jewry. There's a number of other items here, and then it continues more Spanish Jewry, and then it kind of goes, I went here to Dutch Jewish history, Amsterdam. For those that are familiar, the early community, especially in Amsterdam and the Netherlands, was the Spanish-Portuguese community as it came to be known. Spain, they, as many know, they became called to be Marranos or Conversos, and they were forcibly converted. This happened in Portugal in 1497. In 1497, when they went to Portugal, they were forcibly converted in 1497, and there was no Inquisition until 1537. Refer viewers back to the Seforim Chatter series in Spanish Jewry. But so really that community, as they came back to Judaism in Amsterdam, and ended up throughout the New World, London, Livorno, which is Leghorn, Livorno in Italy, and throughout the Atlantic, eventually settling in New York, etc. That came to be known as Spanish-Portuguese community. So there's a lot on them here. Menashe ben Israel is a famous rabbi, is one of them from that community. There's various other books about the community. So that's what I have over here, is a lot of that. I actually have a book on the Jews of Jamaica and some others. That's who that community was. Then over here, once again, is Italian Jewish history. This is the full English translation of the School of Light of the Eyes, Azariah de Rossi's Marinayim. Maybe the first printed book to go into Cherem. It's a very famous work. There's a contracted a podcast episode a while back with the Marami Prague was very upset about it, and others. It was a big controversy. Yosef Karo maybe put in Cherem on his deathbed, maybe he didn't. There's a lot to talk about there. So there's that. There's the Scandal of Kabbalah, a book about the Leon Amadana, Yehuda Arya Madana, in his book Arinaya, where he tax the Zayir as not being Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. But more of interest from him, actually, is this, which is the autobiography of a 17th century Venetian rabbi, Leon Modana's Life of Judah. This is an autobiography. He's a rabbi in the 17th century, and in here we learn about many things about him, including that he was a gambler in Venice, which was a big party city, a massive city. It was the Republic of Venice at the time. Italy wasn't a country till the late 19th century. Venice was a big country, the Venetian Republic, and he was one of the rabbis there. And he's a Talmid Chacham, despite his Arinayim and this autobiography. The Chidan Magal Tov mentions him. It mentions him in Shem Agdalim. There's a lot about him. He did a lot of Seforim. He was involved in printing press. More on him. You can listen to a podcast episode I did, and there's a lot of things written on him, a lot about him. So there's more on the Jews of Italy here. Over here on this shelf is kind of my two interesting series. One is the ongoing series now on the 10 Lost Tribes. This is the literature that I have on it right here. And then over here I have, I don't know what this is doing here, but this is the books on Shabsai Tzvi. So starting with Gershom Sholom's massive tome, 1,000-page book on Shabsai Tzvi, as well as Professor Elisha Kabach's terrific book, classic, on Ramesha Chagiz or Chagiz, and kind of the heresy hunter, if you will, him and Rabbi Yaakov Emden, the Senator McCarthy type, went after everyone. And then this is where really we have the Shabsai Tzvi type works. On this shelf, I get into Ashkenaz and German, really a lot of German history. This book that was up there on the other shelf is the really classic, must-read memoir of Glickl of Hamelin. Glickl was a woman, and she lived, the memoir is from 1691 to 1719, but she lives late 17th, early 18th century, and this is like one of the only women that we have their memoirs at all. She wrote it in Yiddish. It's about her life, and talks a lot about shidduchim. She's busy making shidduchim. She has a lot of kids, and she also becomes a businesswoman. She takes over her husband's business. And it's really riveting. It's a real personal, intimate look at her life. It's a famous book. This is a terrific new translation and edition. A lot of other books over here. One that I would mention also, by the way, I think this is like a theme of this video. Primary sources are really good material. If you want to read something, read the primary source. Read something of interest. And this is a translation of, it's called Jewish Mystical Autobiographies, Book of Visions and Book of Secrets. It's a translation of Reb Chaim Vital's Sefer HaChezionot, also the Kamarnas book as well, a little book. And it's really, read it. It's the book of Reb Chaim Vital's visions and dreams that, personal encounters, that is dreams that he had on other people, dreams other people had on him, things about Gilgal, really interesting and out there things. On this shelf, I have English Hasidic history, so more Hasidus. And I would say for the viewer, I keep saying listener, but for the viewer, I didn't do a lot of Hasidic history. It's not a...
Hang on a second.
What?
No, I just want to move the camera.
No problem. I never know if I'm talking to the same person that listens to the podcast.
Same person.
Whatever. So for the Hasidic history...
Second.
So on this shelf, I have a Hasidic Jewish history in English. And I know I have, here it seems like a lot, I have 2 full shelves, more. So that's a new edition. I bought a lot of these a couple of months ago. I'm planning on doing more Hasidic Jewish history. I haven't done a lot. It's not a strong field of mine. I don't know it really well, but it's something that I think the listeners want. And now the video flipped.
Not bad. Hi, we did really well so far.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
So this is Hasidic Jewish history, and I'm hopefully planning on doing more on Hasidic Jewish history. That's here. This shelf over here, so this is travelogues, again, more primary sources. Travelogues, diaries of travelers, various travelers, translations, very interesting things. Was planning, maybe I still am planning, I'm not sure, of doing a series on Jewish travelers. Does that sound interesting? I don't know. Viewers can email me or let me know. So this is about various travelers through the ages, where they traveled and what they did. One of them being the rare English translation of the Chidaz Magal Tov. Not a great translation, though. It's very literal, and as I said earlier, it's that he wrote in prose, and so it's hard if you translate literal. But some other books here. This shelf really gets into German Jewish history. So this is a book right here that jumps out to me that I did a podcast episode of Windows Underworld, the Court Diaries of Reb Chaim Gundersheim, Frankfurt am Main, 1773-1794, by Professor Edward Fram. And what's fascinating about this book is this is a court diary. We have Shalos Tshuvas, we are familiar with, which are responsa. Someone would have a halachic query, question, and he would send a question to the Rav, wherever it was, and you'd get an answer. This was an actual diary of what happened in court. So this is pretty interesting. It's a really interesting book, and it has a full, you have the Hebrew and the English translation of this book. A number of other books here as well, and then we get into American Jewish history, another field that I haven't really done a lot on, but that's over here. There's plenty of American Jewish history, as you can see here. And then that continues up here, and then it kind of gets everything modern in America. Everything gets all mixed together over here. So you have a lot of things mixed together. Here you have kind of the taller books. This is an issue that I'm sure many viewers can relate to. You have a lot of tall books, and what do? So either you make all the shelves taller, but then you lose kind of space, or if you want to have them uniform, so you end up making like a shelf of tall books, because what else are you supposed to do? So things get lumped together. And so various different books, like there's an index of Hasidus, classic book Hebrew printing in America. It's like an encyclopedia index of that, an English translation of a book on the Ben Ish Chai. There's a book about broadsides, the writing on the wall, really interesting from the Val Madonna collection. A broadside, for those that aren't familiar, is maybe a pashkevil, for those that are familiar. It's something that's printed and pasted on a wall. They're rare to survive because you'd have to pull them off the wall. And so this book, they kind of did prints of broadsides. A picture, here's a wedding riddle, and here's things that they would post on the walls. Different type of thing. Here's symbolic foods Rosh Hashanah, simanim. Here you have prayers for lighting of Hanukkah candles for Hanukkah. So you have all different things. This was a book, a very interesting book. I don't know that it's available anymore, of broadsides. And various other books that just got put here because they don't fit anywhere else. Then this shelf, I have a few other random assorted books. Again, this is like at the end of the library. You have things that just end up there, tossed there. And then here I have some classic texts. Sela Baron's A Social and Religious History of the Jews, who's a classic, famous Jewish historian, and some other books here as well. This is the Israel Zimberg's very interesting A History of Jewish Literature, as he goes through, and the same thing for Mayor Waxman's The History of Jewish Literature, another similar type book. Here's some other things, including the Shadal's translation, the translation of Shadal on Chumash by Dan Klein, who I've had on the podcast a number of times, and some other books, again, other tool books. These are like Chumash related and Seforim related type things. So this is really one part. I think the plan was to do the whole library, but I think we want to keep these videos short and interesting and accessible to people. So this is the other side. This is more Seforim really up here, and we'll keep this for another time, as well as the Seforim Chatter study. We're about kind of classic Seforim, and maybe go more in depth on some of these, or if you like them, what the feedback is. If you're interested in learning more, like I said, maybe we'll take some field trips. So I hope you enjoyed this first episode of Chatter Plus. Thank you so much for watching this first episode of Chatter Plus. Please make sure to hit the subscribe button to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And I would love to hear your feedback, whether that's in the comment section or email me, seforimchatter@gmail.com. Thank you for watching.